what Penfield showed, going back to Penfield briefly, is yes, so considering how the world model is constructed, these hierarchical levels that starts at the back of the brain and then is actually forward, the higher levels are further forward, so you're moving forwards, right? And this is key here. So if you stimulate V1, the lowest level, you're just going to get lines and very simple shapes. If you move the electrode, use like an electrical probe, if you move that a little bit further forward, so a little bit higher up in the cortical hierarchy, you'll see, as you said, the kind of shapes that are represented in that level of the hierarchy. And all the way at the top, you will I think one kid saw robbers with guns or something, very kind of specific scenarios that are modeled at the top of the hierarchy. And so the work you're referring to specifically is Chris Timmerman's work. This was actually done at Imperial College London. And if you, using kind of modern neuroimaging techniques, particularly a particular form of EEG, you can actually kind of visualize the flow of electrical activity from the back of the brain towards the front. So as sensory information enters at the back, you get this flow of electrical activity up the cortical hierarchy. Now, of course, if you close your eyes and you're not viewing anything, then that flow of electrical activity, that flow of brain waves going forward actually decreases. So it kind of starts here, and then if someone closes their eyes, it goes down, and then if they open their eyes again, it jumps back up again. So it maps to the flow of visual information in the brain, as you would expect. Now, what's kind of interesting, and this was first noticed by Jordi Rieber, who was probably the most important kind of pharmacologist who was interested in actually studying the changes in neural activity elicited by ayahuasca. And he did some pioneering work at his lab in Barcelona. And he first noticed that when subjects were given ayahuasca, he saw this kind of increase in the flow of activity, even when the subjects were not viewing anything, when their eyes were closed. He saw an increase in the flow of information from the back of the brain towards the front, so up the cortical hierarchy, suggesting that there was, for some reason, some kind of, even when the eyes were closed, it was as if they were seeing with their eyes shut, right? There was this flow of information from the primary visual cortex, which shouldn't have been stimulated. It wasn't being stimulated anyway by normal sensory inputs from the eyes, obviously. Still, it was becoming activated, and information was flowing up the cortical hierarchy. Then a few years later, well, quite a few years later, a couple of decades later or more, Chris Timmerman's team at Imperial College London used pure DMT, which is, of course, very fast acting, so they can basically monitor those changes in the flow of brain waves in real time. And so first of all, they got their subjects to open their eyes, then close their eyes, then open their eyes again, and they could see the drop in these forward flowing waves when they closed their eyes, which then recovered when they opened their eyes, just to kind of get the baseline. And then the subjects kept their eyes closed, and they injected them with DMT. And almost immediately, within a few seconds of them injecting with DMT, the forward flowing waves started to increase, just as if they'd opened their eyes. So they hadn't opened their eyes, but as if DMT was stimulating this flow of information from the primary visual cortex. So that, to me, this is kind of remarkable, because what you'd expect from this is that, well, you'd expect kind of emergent activity from the primary visual cortex. We know if you stimulate the primary visual cortex, you see geometric forms, you see geometric shapes, geometric patterns and tiling, that kind of thing. That would make sense. But actually, you see something quite different with DMT. In fact, you get transported to this highly coherent alternate reality that is filled with incredibly intelligent beings. So we don't know, basically, whether this is just spontaneous neural activity from the primary visual cortex that's being stimulated by DMT, or whether, as I'm increasingly coming to think might be a real possibility, that somehow gaining access to some other source of sensory information that is accessing through the primary visual cortex even when the eyes are closed.